a win like this produces a lot of conflicting emotions because there's a large segment of the fan base that wanted you guys to lose out and get the number one pick. What do you say to those fans?
Hey, our job is to try to go out and win every week.
I think that's fair enough. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. Adam getting straight to it before we bring in Tannenbaum. And just my thought on it, Chris, is simply this. I mean, look, there's a handful of teams in the NFL that have gone 1-15. Nobody remembers them. They all do remember the 2017 Browns, and they remember the Lions, the 2-0-16 teams. And if they're all going to be shipped out the day the season ends or the day after the season ends, the last thing you want on that resume is any stench of an 0-16 season. A win is a win. 1-15, it sounds silly, is so much better than 0-16 when it comes to your future job prospects, especially when you know, why are we building for 2021? Most of us aren't even going to be here anyway. Mike Tannenbaum joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. So was a win a loss, Mike? What do you think?
I agree with what you just said. The coaches and players in that building, they're not worrying about next year. Everybody else is. And look, there's a massive gap from Trevor Lawrence to everybody else. And as I put out on social media yesterday, there's really a big gap between him and the last three number one picks. When you think about Joe Burrow, Kyle Murray, Baker Mayfield, that's how transcendent Trevor Lawrence is. So the task at hand, guys, right now, if I'm the Jets, is how good is Sam Darnold? Because I have to start thinking about names like Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, and now I go into the Kyle Trask. And there's a whole bunch of guys in college I have to look at. But it really starts with, what do I have in Sam Darnold?
Mr. T, if draft positions hold steady in the last 2 weeks of the season, if you were the general manager of this Jets team with the second overall pick, what would you do? Would you actually draft Justin Fields or one of those other quarterbacks? Or would you try to trade down and get a bevy of picks to build out the rest of the roster?
Yeah, Chris, it's a great question. And as of now, I would still look at a quarterback, because Sam Darnold's had a number of years between USC and what he's done so far in the pros, and I still don't see a high-level, consistent, franchise-level quarterback. Now, in fairness, we could say that going back to USC through now, there hasn't been continuity, skill players, things that we've talked about quite a bit. But at some point, greatness has to shine through and say, I could elevate people around me. So to me, Justin Fields has a better ceiling than Sam Darnold, and certainly I would look at Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, Zach Wilson of BYU, and I would strongly lean towards a quarterback. Now, with that said, Sam Darnold will have a chance to make a closing statement. He has a couple more weeks, and in fairness, this Jet team, as we know, should have beaten the Raiders and really had the Patriots on the ropes not that long ago as well. So it's not a slam dunk, but right now, I just don't see Sam Darnold being that elite player.
On the other side, real quick with the Rams, I know it's a one-off. They're not that bad. They're going to the playoffs. It is a little jarring. McVay used the word embarrassing. Just inside of front office, just for 1 second on the Rams, what's the feeling inside there right now with Les Snead and Sean McVay? Yeah, it's a clunker, but this was a clunker for the ages.
Zubin, it's devastating. And Sean McVay kind of shine light on that a little bit. It's devastating in that building today because you're trying to win the division. You have Seattle, you have Arizona, and you're looking at this game as, we're going to win. A 17-point favorite at home, unacceptable, can't happen. So we'll see if it's just a 1 week sort of bump in the road, or maybe this is who they really are. They're a tough evaluation for me because they were dominant against the Patriots not that 2 weeks ago, and for this to happen is really unacceptable.
Mike T, another great performance by Jalen Hurts. Even though the Eagles don't get the win, it comes down to the wire out there in the desert. If you're the Eagles, what do you do with Carson Wentz? Do you go into the offseason with a quarterback competition, or is Jalen Hurts doing enough to say that this is his team going into 2021?
Chris, Jalen Hurts was really impressive yesterday. I thought the game slowed down for him. He made a lot of plays again with his arm, with his feet. He has a couple more weeks, and I'm going to collect all that information before I make a decision. And while you're dealing from a position of strength because you want depth at that position, if Jalen Hurts continues to play this way, you can't have him and Carson Wentz on your team next year. And Carson Wentz with that massive cap hit, you may have to look at doing something with him if Jalen Hurts continues to play this way because he played at a winning level for the second consecutive week.
Okay, so now what happens regarding Wentz? Just to get everybody up to speed, there was so much sports this weekend. It was like sports overload with college football, the college basketball, the NFL. You may have missed this. There was a report from Adam Schefter yesterday morning that essentially said that if he is going to be the backup, this, of course, speaking of Wentz, that he wanted out. Later in the day, there was some reporting late in the evening that wasn't particularly the case. We got to get through the rest of the season. The first two games here from Hurts indicate it's going to be his job, at least the rest of the way. Common sense would tell you. So if you have those dueling narratives out there, all that money sitting on the bench, Hurts playing well, all of this swirling, what do you do with Wentz?
Carson Wentz is going to want to start. He's too much of a competitor. He's accomplished too much at the NFL level. And to me, all signs point to Indianapolis. Indianapolis needs a young quarterback. He's had a ton of success with Frank Reich, their head coach.
But it only stands to reason. We've got a Super Bowl champion with the race to the Super Bowl narrowing a little bit. Chris Canty is with us this morning for the next 4 hours. Good morning. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Zoo. How you doing?
I'm doing great. First things first, I'm doing great, but not nearly as great as the Cleveland Browns. Kevin Stefanski right up there for Coach of the Year. Let's just hear from Kevin Stefanski on the resurgent play of his quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I thought Baker was outstanding tonight. He was dialed in. It's really what I expect from him. It's what he expects from himself. It's how he practices. But I really thought he was sharp.
Let's lay it on the line here. They haven't exactly clinched a playoff berth just yet. They could get there next week. They'll be playing at the Jets, second team to have that Giants-Jets double dip on the road. The Niners did it earlier this season. So if the Browns can win and get some help by losses from three other teams who they're chasing at this particular point or are chasing them, then you're in a situation where they'll snap the NFL's longest playoff drought, which goes back to 2002. It appears as though it's only a matter of time until that happens. The biggest reason the Browns are in position to make the playoffs for the first time in almost 20 years is what?
I think it's the marriage between the run game and the pass game. And Kevin Stefanski has done a good job of figuring out what Baker Mayfield is good at and what he's not, and trying to put him in situations that accentuate his strengths. You look at what they did last night, being able to stay with the run game just enough to provide that balance and the threat that makes play action effective. Only 3.2 yards per carry between Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. But in those 22 attempts, you keep those linebackers honest, you keep those guys coming downhill, and then you're able to find those voids between the second and third levels of the defense. And Baker Mayfield was surgical last night, only 5 incompletions. And you got to give some love to his offensive line, too, because they kept him clean. Even with Hubbard going out, they still provided clean pockets for him. Only one quarterback hit in 37 dropbacks. So that's impressive that the offensive line could keep him that clean. But I think Baker Mayfield's understanding of what Kevin Stefanski wants to do and Kevin Stefanski's understanding of what his quarterback strengths are, that's what's leading the charge for this late season surge for the Browns.
They had 2 95-yard scoring drives, including when one was capped, Jarvis Landry turning around, popping up a 1, popping up a 3 to pay homage to Odell Beckham Jr. You saw that?
Isaac Yiadom for the Giants didn't like that too much. But, I mean, the Giants were shorthanded on the back end. They didn't have James Bradbury. So you knew that their defense would struggle, especially in pass coverage. What I was a little bit surprised was with the complexion of the game, because I thought that their head coach, Joe Judge, did some things to put even more pressure on a defense that was trying to support an offense with a backup quarterback.
Indeed, and Joe Judge did say, I don't regret any of the aggressive play calling that was made. He definitely seems like a guy that doesn't have a lot of regrets. He just does what he wants to do and moves forward. From the Browns standpoint, you know, Jay is our resident Giant fan, but he actually said all week long last week on the program that even though he's a ride-or-die Giants fan, that this is a bigger game for the Browns. It certainly turned out to be a bigger game considering where their aspirations are vis-a-vis the Giants. But Jay also said, and I was taken a little aback by that, as was Keyshawn, that he really believes the Browns can, ready for this, win the Super Bowl.
Ooh.
Win the Super Bowl. We've got all these things about snapping the playoff drought, getting to the 10-win mark for the first time since 2007. They haven't won the division in 28 years. That's also the longest drought. I mean, that was the AFC Central. It wasn't even called the North back then. I think the Steelers win tonight. They sort of pretty much put it out of reach on ESPN against the Bengals. Super Bowl, though, is that a little too much? I was a little bit taken aback by that.
Jay's putting a little too much on that one. You know, sometimes you have that overreaction Monday, but you're talking about a Browns defense that prior to this game gave up over 80 points in the 2 games that they played. So I think it's a little too early for Super Bowl talk, but it's definitely reasonable to expect this team to get into the postseason and potentially win a postseason game, which is a huge step for the Cleveland Browns program, for their new general manager, Andrew Berry, and their new head coach, and Kevin Stefanski.
It's amazing. Baker's 25, Garrett's 24, Andrew Berry, the GM, is 33, the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, is 38. All they do is build, implode, build, implode. Now it feels like they got a nice, young, great foundation